The wind howled through the jagged cliffs of the outlands, whispering secrets of the stars above and tragedies long buried in the red Martian dust. Max Walker, a former Earth Special Forces engineer turned interstellar drifter, crouched beside a sputtering campfire, eyes scanning the horizon through cracked binoculars. His only companion was a shaggy, rust-colored dog named Rufus, a genetically modified Australian Shepherd mix who was both smarter and more loyal than most humans Max had fought beside in the war. After retiring from military service, Max had settled far from the bustle of the core worlds, choosing instead a remote Martian plateau to rebuild crashed satellites, trade salvage, and forget the pain of loss. But that night everything changed. Rufus began to growl, ears flicking. Then he barked, a sharp, urgent call unlike any Max had heard. "What is it, boy?" Max rose instantly, instinct kicking in. The dog bounded toward the ridge. Max followed, pulse rising. There, half buried in a rock crevice beneath a fallen glider wing, lay a figure, tall, lean, with iridescent skin streaked with blood the color of silver. Her eyes fluttered. She was alive. Barely. An alien. And not just any alien, one of the Ilari. Middle. The Ilari were a reclusive race from the outer spirals, rarely seen in human sectors. Known for their bioluminescent markings and psi-sensitive minds, they were fiercely independent and notoriously proud. Seeing one crash this far from Ilari space. Unheard of. Max didn't hesitate. He lifted the unconscious girl into his arms, noting the fractured bone protruding through her leg. "You picked a hell of a place to fall, lady." Back at the cabin, Max worked quickly. A med kit, surgical glue, bone knitters, old war tools he never thought he'd use again. Rufus lay nearby, alert but calm. The girl awoke with a gasp, then froze, eyes wild with fear. "You're safe," Max said, raising his hands. "You crashed." "Hey, Max. That's Rufus." Her voice was hoarse. "You are human." He nodded. "Guilty." "You're Ilari." She hesitated, then said, "My name is Lissari. I was being hunted." That's when Max noticed the faint scars on her wrists, too precise for accident. Implants. Shackles. Over the next few days, Lissari recovered. Max kept his questions light, letting her speak when ready. Eventually the truth spilled out. She was a psi-empath, born with abilities the Ilari Council deemed dangerous. Instead of training her, they confined her, fearing her mind could touch others too deeply, influence thoughts unintentionally. When she tried to escape their control, they marked her as rogue. "They called me a threat," she whispered one night. "But I never wanted power. Just freedom." Max clenched his jaw. He had seen too many young soldiers discarded by their governments after wars no one remembered fighting. He saw the same fire in Lissari's eyes, one that flickered with pain but refused to go out. "You're safe now," he told her. "But if they're tracking you, we'll need to be careful." Indeed, 2 days later, a dropship screamed across the canyon. Ilari enforcers. They hadn't come to negotiate. Climax. Max activated the emergency defense grid around his homestead, an old patched-together shield dome from salvaged tech. It would hold for a while, but not forever. "I'll surrender," Lissari said, trembling. "If I go willingly, they might." "No," Max interrupted. "You've tasted freedom. You don't give it back. Not like this." She stared at him, stunned. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Max looked at Rufus, then back at her. "Because someone once did the same for me. I never forgot it. And because I believe in second chances." Lissari stepped forward. "I can amplify your grid. Temporarily. With my psi-link." "It'll kill you," Max warned. "Not if you stabilize the frequency." I'll need your mind, your focus, to anchor me. They worked side by side, modifying the emitter core. As dusk fell, the first shot from the Ilari dropship splashed harmlessly against the reinforced barrier. But the next one cracked the outer grid. Rufus growled. Time was running out. Lissari sat inside the control ring, eyes glowing with eerie violet light. Now, she whispered. Max took her hand. Their minds connected. Not merged, but aligned like two symphonies suddenly playing in harmony. Pain lanced through his skull. Images, memories, her childhood cage, his battlefield losses, flashed between them. But so did hope. Strength. Outside, the grid flared like a nova, shattering the attack drone in a burst of white fire. The rest of the enforcers retreated. Ending. When Max awoke, he was on the floor of the cabin. Rufus licked his face. He sat up, dizzy but alive. Lissari lay beside him, unconscious, but breathing. Over the next week, the two recovered. News trickled in. The Ilari Council had been forced to acknowledge their botched capture. Galactic Watchers had recorded everything. Max's broadcast of the assault reached neutral systems, shaming the Ilari into standing down. Lissari was granted asylum under interstellar law. But more than that, she was now a symbol. Proof that even those branded dangerous could be something more. Months passed. The cabin evolved into a refuge. Others, humans, aliens, came seeking sanctuary, bringing their stories, their wounds. And always by the door sat Rufus, watching. One night, under the starlight, Lissari stood with Max, gazing out at the horizon. You changed everything, she said softly. He shook his head. We did. She smiled, eyes glowing faintly. Your mind was the first to ever accept mine. No fear. No walls. You deserved more, Max said. You gave me that, she replied. You and that amazing creature of yours. They looked down at Rufus, who wagged his tail proudly. In a galaxy filled with war, prejudice, and silence, it had taken a loyal dog's bark to change a fate written in chains. The silence that followed the attack felt unnatural, almost sacred. Max stood beside Lissari as the last flickers of the failed Ilari assault vessel disappeared into the Martian sky. The defensive field she had bolstered with her mind powers was gone now, burned out from the sheer force of her will. The glow in her eyes had dimmed, but she remained standing. Barely. Rufus whined softly and pressed his snout to her trembling hand. Max stepped forward. You okay? Lissari gave him a tired smile. For the first time in my life. Yes. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. A neutral envoy from the Galactic Concord, responding to Max's distress broadcast. They had seen the Ilari's violation of interstellar law in real time. It was enough to launch a formal investigation. Lissari was no longer just a fugitive. She was a witness, a symbol of resilience. Within weeks, her name began circulating through rebel networks, freedom forums, and even Ilari resistance circles. The council was pressured into retreating from their witch hunt, forced to answer for their actions under the scrutiny of the Concord. Max didn't want any part of the politics. But Lissari, he chose to stay. Not to fight with fists or flame, but with stories, hers and others like hers. The cabin Max had built on Mars became more than just a home. It became a sanctuary. A safe haven for those deemed too much, too dangerous, or too different. And always at the gate, ever alert, ever faithful, was Rufus. People began calling it the Bark Sanctuary, a nod to the moment that started it all. A dog's instinct to protect not just his owner, but a stranger too. Lissari and Max would go on to build something bigger than either of them had imagined. Together, they created a space where no voice was too strange to be heard, no past too broken to be healed. And long after the Ilari Council fell into reform and new leaders rose, tales would still be told across the stars. Of the injured alien girl, the ex-soldier who listened, and the dog who barked at fate itself and changed the universe.